Here's Johnny. This is Sparta! So simple. Roll out.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to the new podcast presented by the female film critics of InSession Film. We are speaking, we love movies, we are Women in Session. Thank you, dear listeners. We have been here about a year. We're still new. We're getting up towards 50 episodes. Our flagship's on 500 and something. So we're still relatively new, but we're just so grateful to be having some listeners and to InSessionFilm.com for creating this platform. JD Duran, our illustrious leader, he handles all our technology for us wonderfully. So we wanted to share the love a little bit, have a little bit of celebratory things happening where we wanted to have some more guests and some interviews and some critic spotlights because, you know, to us, it's very important to share about unique voices in film and the diverse film criticism community. So us as women wanting to spread that love. So we wanted to get inside the head of our illustrious Amy Thomasson. I am Kristin Battestella at Therefore Review. Amy Thomasson at A Thomasson 11 is here. Zita Short of the 300 Passions podcast is here. Ladies, thank you. We're being a little indulgent, but that's okay. That's okay. Now, Amy, we were trying to remember, we were asking you, when did you even start podcasting? And you said it was actually, seems like a while ago now, 2017.
My first episode, yes, was November 2nd, 2017. It was the first episode I did of the now completed podcast, the Oscar Watch podcast with my very good friend Stephen Buja,
which not your good friend at the time because you were arguing about the apartment.
He was a total stranger, and I was looking for a new podcast, and I saw one called the Oscar Watch podcast. So the Oscars that perked me up, and basically we went through movies that won Best Picture, and we also kind of went into movies we should have won Best Picture with our Should Have Been a Contender series. We also did Best Animated and Best Foreign Films. So I listened to the episode on the movie The Apartment, which all of you at home know is one of my favorite movies, Billy Wilder. He and his co-host at the time were not fans of this movie, and they spent most of the episode ripping on it. And I felt I simply must email these people and set them straight. So I sent a very lengthy, several paragraphs long email correcting them in their opinions. And Steve responded to me and said, "Wow, you have very strong opinions." I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Would you ever want to be a guest on the show?" And I'd never podcasted before, ever. And I'd always wanted to. And I was like, wow. And I was so nervous. He said, "You can pick any movie you want to do." And I picked 1955 Best Picture winner, Marty. And I went on to do a couple more episodes. And then the original co-host was getting a degree or had to stop to pursue something else. So I was invited on as the permanent co-host. And we did, we started in November 2nd, 2017. And we went until December 31st, 2018. Our last episode was the Should Have Been a Contender, 1931 City Lights. So if anybody's interested in some of my older work, that would be it. And Stephen Buja was an excellent co-host.
Mostly you write the How Are They Not Nominated series at InSession Film.
Yes.
Zita, I know have questions about your work. Zita?
Okay.
We do. We're ready to dive into Amy's extensive oeuvre. So I think like a lot of other people, I sort of became aware of your work during the period in which you were appearing on Kevin Jacobson's podcast.
The great Kevin Jacobson.
Oh, yes, he's wonderful. Just a fantastic human being. So unbelievably kind. One of those people that you meet and you can't believe that people are that nice. But
agreed.
you really stood out on that podcast. I think for a lot of people, you're a very fiery guest. You're very opinionated, and you come in with a lot of knowledge of the subject at hand, which I think for a lot of people is really exciting, to have someone who can really hold their own against Kevin, who has obviously been through every single year of the Academy Awards at this point with a fine-tooth comb.
Oh, yes. Every single Best Picture winner and every single Best Picture nominee that man has seen and made intelligent conversations about.
Yes. And I just recall you were sort of electric on a couple of the episodes that I listened to. I was really intrigued by the fact that you and Kevin managed to have disputes without things getting too ugly or bitter. It was definitely a very friendly conversation on the whole. And I think that for a lot of people, that was when they first sort of became aware of your work, got more interested in other things that you were doing. And I just wondered, how did you get involved with that?
Oh, wonderful. Well, Kevin had emailed Stephen and I about doing, I think he wanted one of us for Apocalypse Now and then one of us for E.T. And one thing people need to understand about me is, yes, I have a lot of opinions, but even more than that, I'm shocked that anybody cares that I have opinions. So the fact that Kevin even wanted me on the show was shocking to me, because I feel like I was honored that Stephen invited me to be on his show, even just to guest one time. So that was exciting. He asked me back to do the 1968 episode on The Lion in Winter. And 1968's Academy Awards were one of the best. Stephen and I had also covered The Lion in Winter. So now there are 2 podcast episodes in existence in which you get all my opinions on The Lion in Winter. After that, Kevin and another brilliant podcaster, Mr. Tom O'Brien, and I do a lot of the Patreon episodes titled How Did They Win?, which is also under Kevin Jacobson's, and the runner-up is Umbrella, where Patreon subscribers ask, we did the Best Supporting Actor race the year that like Michael Caine won for The Cider House Rules. We did the Best Actor race the year that Olivia Colman won. And we kind of discussed those races. And apparently we've been doing those for 5 years, which I didn't realize until we did our most recent episode, which was very exciting. And then from that, I got to know, some of the names out there. Ryan McQuaid was another one who was on Kevin's show a lot. And he sent out a tweet that said, hey, we're looking for writers for In-Session Film. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I give it a try? And I was invited on to write for In-Session, which was such an honor and it's such a delight. It makes me so happy. And then from there, now I do the Women InSession. And I've been asked to be on Zita Short's podcast, and where we discussed A Summer Place. So I feel like everything has led me to something else and something new and deeper. And I've met such amazing people like you two ladies, Kevin Jacobson, Tom O'Brien, Ryan McQuaid, Charlie Bright, Joey Gentili, just the whole group of us. And we're all over the world. And it's just really exciting and makes me happy.
Yes, your Twitter handle does say world famous podcaster, of course.
It does say. I have because through Stephen Buges, I can say this. I have a Canadian friend named Michael. I'm not going to use his last name, Michael, who we are Facebook friends, and he will message me and ask about movies. And I was like, there is somebody in Canada listening to my ramblings about movies. And it's really just crazy, because I know my family gets tired of hearing me sometimes.
Quote world. Yeah, Canada.
Canada and New Zealand. Hello,
yes.
New Zealand.
Yes.
A different hemisphere.
Because I always say you're our drama teacher by day, in-session film critic by night.
Yes.
You also have, yes, there's a lot of literature and theater background. So, which to
I
me
do.
doesn't seem that far different from having a lot of classic Hollywood interests. So how did you
No.
get interested in old Hollywood movies?
Well, I really can kind of boil it down to, I think, the summer before 7th grade. When I was in school, our music teacher, there was one little show that we did where we did a bunch of songs from various operas and musicals. And this is, I mean, like I said, this is elementary school. And one of the songs was If I Was a Belle from Guys and Dolls. So I got interested in all of these things. And another one was like Not While I'm Around from Sweeney Todd. So I started listening to it and kind of reading about it. And oh, that's interesting. So that summer I watched the film version of Guys and Dolls. I fell madly in love with Marlon Brando, circa 1950s.
Oh.
And I rented, so that summer I watched Guys and Dolls every single day. And I decided circa 1950s Marlon Brando was my boyfriend. I watched On the Waterfront. I watched The Wild One. I watched A Streetcar Named Desire and The Godfather. So did I understand all those movies? Not exactly, but that was sort of my jumping off point. And then I started getting books on film and I started reading all the books, and they sort of opened me up to other movies from reading these books. So like The Apartment, oh, that looks really interesting, and Psycho and all of that. And then I got this book that I still have my copy of it. I've had it since I was 14 years old. It's a book called The Alternate Oscars, which I have read this book. And that's really when I got interested in the Oscars. And again, the other movies that were nominated that year and who was in them and what did people think about them. So that was really it. I got in high school, I was really into Cabaret. That movie really defines everything that I wanted to be as a human, which now that I think about it, it sounds really weird. But yeah, Sally Bowles was my hero. I still really liked Brando. Splendor in the Grass was another movie I fell madly in love with when I was in high school. So yeah, it just, and kind of from there in college, I watched a lot of movies. I took like only one film class though, but honestly, if I had a regret in college, I double majored in theater and English, and looking back, I would have double majored in theater and film and maybe gotten a minor in English. But there's plenty of time for that. But I didn't study film pursue film, and I feel that that's a regret that I have.
That's one of the reasons also why I was thinking about all these critic spotlights and interviews, because we have a lot of folks, Erica, Eve O'Day, who have film academia credentials. And it's something, I guess, maybe you're of a slightly earlier Gen Z, maybe there weren't as many film opportunities, or it didn't seem like a legitimate thing to be like, I'm going to go to college to watch movies.
Or make films. I wanted to be a film director. And we knew
throw that out. Yeah, I wanted to be a film director.
We knew, I had a very good friend when I was in elementary school, and her father made documentaries for like PBS. And he always said to my mom, oh, well, if someone wants to major in film, I tell them, don't major in film. You should major in whatever you're passionate about, and then like learn how to make films after the fact. And I was told that story a lot. And so I regret that now, though, because I feel like you make connections in school that you don't get a chance to make, and it's much harder. But as far as like being like a film historian or whatever, I'm self-taught. I don't have that. My mom is so sweet. She's like, you should be a college professor and teach all of this. I was like, I don't have a degree. That's a problem. I haven't written a book. I just know, I know a lot of stuff. I can say that I know a lot.
One thing that I really love about, I guess, the sort of lore of Amy Thomasson is when she talks about teaching her students specifically with monologues from famous films. And I feel as though I can just sort of imagine Amy doing it. And to me, it's great that you get this opportunity to kind of pass on this love of film to these younger people to maybe expand their horizons a bit. I have to imagine that you are getting them to watch films that might be a little bit outside of their comfort zone. And I think that's really great to have that much passion for the discipline, and also to have that sort of working knowledge of the craft of acting. Such a big criticism of critics is that, oh, well, what do you know? You have no background in actually making films or working in any creative industries. And I think it's really great that you do have this hands-on experience being an actress and teaching this profession.
Thank you. I really loved it. When I started teaching drama, it was difficult because I'm not in an area where I wasn't at a school where when I started teaching at the school, they didn't have a drama class. So I kind of rallied for it. And then I was given it, and I wanted them to experience. I grew up in New Jersey, 19 miles outside of New York City. I got to go see a lot of shows, and these kids don't. So I thought, if I could just sort of get their feet wet and also break some stereotypes for them of what musical theater is. So I would generally start, and at one point I would always show them Fiddler on the Roof, 1971, just as a cultural thing and as a universal thing, that yes, here's a film and musical that takes place in 1900 in a small community in a very tiny little town of Russia. And it's about, Jewish traditions, yet somehow it's so universal because it's about life. It's about marriage. It's about having children. It's about passing on traditions. It's about relationships with God. And I wanted them to get that. And I wanted them to learn a little bit and imagine, okay, well, they don't have names like we do. They have names that sound strange to us, like Laser Wolf. And it was really interesting showing them Sunset Boulevard, which is a movie you really have to pay attention to. But by the end of the movie, they were like, oh my gosh, what a great movie. And Some Like It Hot, when we talked about Some Like It Hot, I showed them that, and they thought it was really funny. So again, if I could just sort of open up their minds a little bit, that's kind of my goal. Or maybe one day they'll be watching Turner Classic Movies and be like, oh, hey, I remember I had that drama teacher who we watched this in her class.
You hit on one of the serious things that I wanted to ask, or I thought was perceived serious, because we grew up in a time, before the internet, where it was like old white men film critics. You got like the little blurb in your newspaper, and it was very just clean cut, kind of straightforward. And as opposed to now, when things are much more, can be deeper or insightful. And the idea of, to me, the film critic should be personal. It should be about the film testimony. So for you, it is about that reach out and touch someone through cinema, compared to just the unbiased, straightforward, here's the analysis of the film.
It is. It's hard. And I feel even however many years ago, when Stephen invited me onto a show as a guest, I noticed he is a man and his co-host was a man, and he never had a woman on the show. And so I pointed this out in my lengthy email, and he's like, you're right, we do need a female perspective. And a female perspective, it seemed that if a woman was critiquing, that it had to be from the quote unquote feminist perspective. And I thought, I don't see it that way. I watch movies from the Amy perspective. And so when I would watch Lawrence of Arabia, no, I don't want to write about, wow, there's no women in this film and women have no agency in this film. And because that has nothing to do with the actual movie. And people, love to dump on Martin Scorsese and say, oh, well, he only makes gangster movies. Well, he doesn't, though. And if you actually look at his filmography, there's maybe 3 movies that deal with that, or he doesn't write enough from a woman's perspective. And it's my personal opinion is, why should he have to do that? Shouldn't every storyteller have their perspective? This is his perspective. But some of my favorite movies would probably be considered more traditionally masculine, being Goodfellas, Bridge on the River Kwai. There's not a lot of women in Bridge on the River Kwai, but I still think it's one of the best movies ever.
Because, you know, in our day and age of the internet, there's a lot of, for as much love as we get on Twitter, it's really nice. You know, we've got a few comments. Thank you to dear listeners out there in the ether, you know, that have said, you know, they like that we have a really unique perspective, that we pick out things that are different. But you do also have naysayers who are like, oh, of course it's a woman who's going to write emotionally about a movie, or oh, how that's so cute. Your little hobby is writing about movies on the side. You know? You know, how do you, you know, deal with that kind of work-life kind of balance and any naysayers?
I guess I'm lucky enough. I don't read a lot of that stuff. It is hard. I will say the biggest naysaying that ever happened was when I wrote about my opinions on a film called Mad Max Fury Road, which, in my humble opinion, is a very masculine movie and not one that I liked. And I wrote an article on it and I got a lot of backlash on it. And at first it was a little frightening. I mean, not like people were threatening me, like not like that, but just the vitriol. Because from what I noticed, a lot of, I'm going to say it, straight white men really like that movie a lot. And I got a lot of backlash from it and from people that I really respect. But that being said, I own that that's my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me. That's okay. I was not a big fan of the movie 1917. I think it's a well-made movie. I think technically it's a marvel. It was shot beautifully. Does it say anything new about war that hasn't been said 800 times? No, it doesn't. And I like movies that take an interesting perspective on things. And a lot of times I liked Jojo Rabbit. I liked Life is Beautiful. And those movies get dumped on. But I see it as imagining Nazi Germany from the perspective of a child. I have never seen anything that does that. Life is Beautiful, where it's more about the triumph of the human spirit than a quote unquote Holocaust movie. And it was interesting. And I liked that. Saying that, wow, the US, you know, we're heroes in the war. That's not the most crazy take to have on a film. I like movies that kind of question certain things.
Zita, your point, counterpoint.
Oh, no. I think that's an interesting perspective. And I do think it can be frustrating, especially on, I guess, what we would call film Twitter, that a lot of the coverage of contemporary cinema and new releases does seem to be sort of cautious. I feel as though I very rarely encounter critics anymore who are, much as I dislike a lot of her work, sort of Pauline Kael types. I feel as though it's very rare to see negative reviews of films that are not the movies that have already been earmarked as the worst movies of the year. When Cats came out, every single online critic was taking a stab at it. But I generally find that if it's a highly anticipated film, if it already sort of has a fan base behind it, certain online publications that I won't name, their writers seem very hesitant to say anything critical about it, even if perhaps they didn't like it. And to me, that is a problem. I know that it's worse to just be a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian, but I find it really boring when you get just sort of these polite namby-pamby reviews And I feel as though Amy doesn't do that. There is a very strong sense of a personal perspective there. And I think for a lot of readers, that's really encouraging. And it's great to have a sense that the critic is bringing something of themselves to the table, instead of it being a sort of strangely impersonal review that is 80% plot description, which again is a problem with other critics. And I think Amy isn't guilty of trying to be inoffensive, which does seem to be a trend in criticism at the moment.
Women don't have time to sugarcoat it. You know, one time we were doing the podcast and Amy said, sorry, hold on a minute, I have to go change a diaper. And I just thought to myself, you know, male critics, you know, don't have time to write. You know, I was having a bad day, and I'm sure that contributed to why I didn't like this movie. And Amy, I don't remember what it was. One time you said to me, you know, that you were doing a review for In Session, and you said, well, I kind of didn't like the movie. I didn't really feel that it was for me. It was lacking. And I said, well, so what? That's part of your review. Amy?
I do that. I do that a lot. And one thing I really try to do is before I write a review, I try not to read anything that other people say about it. And there are times where I will love a movie and then realize, oh, wait a minute, I wasn't supposed to like this. And I bring it back to Jojo Rabbit was one of those movies that I saw it. I thought it was great. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was well acted. I could go on and on. Yet, whoops, I'm supposed to not like this movie. And like I said, with Mad Max Fury Road, I was like, yes, the technology is amazing. However, I'm wondering, wait a minute, if they're trying to save on gas, why are they all driving all their cars? Shouldn't they be like conserving it? And I was blasted for writing about things like that took me out of the movie. And I don't take it personally. Like, I assume, of course, people are going to disagree with me. This is my opinion.
Do you consciously choose what to review going by your interest, or is it what's available to you, or do you have to think of family-friendly things to watch?
For me, it's what's available. When I've reviewed films, it's been what's available. I came up with my why, and originally it was not how wasn't this particular movie nominated. The original concept was how was this nominated at all for Best Picture? And I came up with the idea because I feel like every year there's one of those like, wait a minute, what? And I bring you to, just off the top of my head, 1967, when you have The Graduate, groundbreaking. Bonnie and Clyde, groundbreaking. In the Heat of the Night, groundbreaking, and still totally, that movie could take place today. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Not a personal favorite, but again, dealt with big themes. And then Dr. Dolittle. What? Like, how do these movies sneak in? And then so I was like, okay, so we'll write about the one that shouldn't have been nominated, and then pick a movie that wasn't nominated that should be in there. So having to pick the movie, and so then it sort of metamorphosized into, how is this movie not nominated? And I try to shine the light on some films that I think really deserve to be nominated. One of them was the foreign film The Hunt with Mads Mikkelsen. Such an incredible movie, yet not nominated for Best Picture. But I do get some slack when people are like, wait a minute, that movie was amazing, because I did write about, my first article I talked about 1917. That was my first one. And I knew I was going to make a lot of people unhappy.
What was the last movie you watched?
In the theaters, like recently, or for that session, for that series? The last movie I went to see, The Little Mermaid, and I reviewed it with JD. But the last movie I watched, I watched St. Elmo's Story yesterday morning in my house. St. Elmo's Fire. Yes. While I was doing laundry and cleaning up my living room, I was watching St. Elmo's Fire, which is a movie I've seen 100 million times. And yet that movie is awful. And I hate every single character in that film. The hairstyles are terrible. I don't know how they styled the women. That movie like irks me. Yet I am drawn to it, and I could probably watch that movie every day.
Okay.
I don't understand.
We have to talk about this because I am also obsessed and sort of grotesquely fascinated by St. Elmo's Fire. You are right. The characters in that film are evil, even though none of them are serial killers, none of them are poisoning children, and yet you despise every one of them. The Emilio Estevez subplot.
Yes!
Who thought that was cute to have him stalk Andy McDowell, whom he barely knows, and then she, we are meant to believe at the end of the film, thinks it's cute that he's been creepily gazing at her and her actual boyfriend,
smelling her pillow in her apartment.
It's so weird.
You've got the stalker. You've got sad sack Andy McCarthy, who's pining away for Leslie. He's just sad and pathetic and weird and has all pictures of her, and he's creepy too. You've got Rob Lowe, who is married, openly cheating on his wife, and yet is somehow kind of dating Wendy, but like not really. I don't understand it. Okay. Then you've got Judd Nelson, who's cheating on his fiance and giving up his morals for money. Those are the men that we are presented with in this film.
This is why Demi Moore just, cradles herself on the bathroom floor. And
yes, with her windows open.
The song is happy.
Okay.
All you need is a pair of wings.
This is yet another detail that I'm obsessed with. In order to kill herself, she decides that the best method would just be to leave the windows open on kind of a cold day. It's not
a little chilly.
It's chilly. And she thinks, hypothermia, that's the best way to go. And then they all rush in, her band of friends, to save her. And it's so bizarre. And she's sleeping with her boss or something. That's the whole plot point. God.
It's so strange, but I don't understand Rob Lowe's relationship with Mare Winningham.
No.
Are they supposed to be dating or not? Why is she treating him? Yes. It doesn't make sense. And the woman that he's married to, don't you think that she would have been part of their group?
I have no idea.
Like, wouldn't you assume that if he knew this woman in college, got her pregnant, had a baby, and married her, that she would be part of that circle of friends too? Instead, they're all like, ugh, that's his wife. She's so awful. And it's like, no, she's home raising your kid while you're out playing with your friends.
1980s, man. We are not running out of topics, folks. We definitely have a list of 1980s things to discuss as well, man. Us of a certain age, the 1980s left some marks. Do you still have a VCR, Amy?
I will still watch that movie like 100,000 more times in my life. I'm just letting you know this. I will probably watch it tomorrow.
Amy, do you agree that all of the main characters in that film, if they had lived until 2016, would have been Trump supporters?
Yes, especially what's his name? Especially Judd Nelson. Judd Nelson would be one of his lawyers right now. Alec Newberry, that dude, he would be one of Trump's lawyers right now.
Yes.
They're just, oh my God, insufferable. Yet, like I said, I could watch this movie 100. I could watch this movie.
Was that one of your favorite movies when you were a kid?
No, I saw it like in college. And even then I was like, I didn't understand, like, and Ali Sheedy's a beautiful woman in that movie, though, the way that she is styled and her hair and the pearls and all that. She looks like she's 55. she acts like she's 55. And I'm like, and these men are like, marry me. I'm so madly, passionately in love with you. And I'm like, really? And how are the girls even friends? They are so different. And it just makes no sense.
Yes, and it's also yet another movie in which Andrew McCarthy, he can't seem to prevent this, but his eyes are so wet in every scene. He always looks like he's on the verge of crying. And so there's the big seduction scene in which he sort of steals Ellie Sheedy away from Judge Nelson. I kid you not, he just stares at her with his sad, depressed eyes, and she somehow from this divines that, oh, he wants to have sex. It's so bizarre.
And if she had it, and he dumped her, Alec dumps her because she figured out that he cheated on her, so he dumps her publicly in front of everyone at some stupid party. Amelia Westphal is throwing to impress Andy McDowell, who doesn't even go to the party. It's just so insane. What is wrong with these people?
Insights into the film critic's mind. How Amy Thomasson is trying to explain like the 80s to Miss Zita Short.
I don't get it, but I feel so less alone in the world right now. And this is the best thing about film Twitter, though, is that we're all connected to each other. And we share these experiences, and it makes us feel alive.
I feel the same way about Diner. Like, it's like, oh my God, it's so great. And when I saw it, I'm like, it's just like dudes. Like,
it's awful.
Like their lives, you know?
I have
like,
opinion.
Really?
The only men worse than the men in St. Elmo's Fire is every character in Diner. That's the most misogynistic movie I've ever seen in my life. Oh my God. And guys are like, oh, it's so great. I'm like, if you're a man and you like that movie, you've probably drugged some woman and raped her while she was unconscious. Just saying.
That escalated quickly.
It did, but those men.
These were the films that were around when you were a kid. Did you get to see these in the movie theater, or did you wait till they came?
No, I had very, very protective parents. I wasn't allowed to see Dirty Dancing because the title of the movie was Dirty Dancing. Seriously, I wasn't allowed to see. I remember
like Footloose.
No, I didn't see any of those. It was very weird. Once I started getting to movies on my own, that was the thing. But I remember when I was 13 in one of my movie books, I really wanted to watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And my parents were like, I think it would disturb you. They were probably right. But at the same time, but a lot of those 80s movies I didn't see. No, I saw the other ones. I saw Pretty in Pink, Breakfast Club. But St. Elmo's Fire I didn't see till I was older. Endless Love is another terrible movie, but I will watch that every day.
You remember what you saw in the movie theaters the first time you went to the movies?
Most of the Disney movies, I would say. I remember seeing The Little Mermaid. I remember seeing Aladdin. Remember seeing The Lion King. Not a big fan. That makes me unpopular at parties. But I'm like, I likes what I likes. I did not like that.
Did you have like a favorite actor, actress of the time from the teeny bopper magazines with the posters on your walls?
Oh, as far as like the modern films, I remember seeing those 90s teen comedies. I saw all those. When I was really little, I will say this, and I wrote a fan letter in elementary school because I saw License to Drive with the Coreys, plural. And I wrote a fan letter to Corey Haim. I never got anything back, but I remember that. And I saw License to Drive, by the way, more than once in the movie theater.
Okay, Amy, were you allowed to go out and see The Lost Boys?
No, I don't think that movie was on my radar.
Okay.
But the teen comedies, I definitely remember seeing Clueless. I remember the friends I saw it with. In college, I remember that's when I got more into like independent films, I guess. I saw the movie Kids, Boogie Nights, The Full Monty. That came out freshman year of college. Life is Beautiful, all of those. Beautiful. That was when the first time I really watched the Academy Awards was 1990. I was little, but my friend's mom took us to see Dances with Wolves, and we thought Kevin Costner was cute, so we wanted that film to sweep. And then I was in college, and I watched Goodfellas on the Hoosier movie station at my then boyfriend's dorm room. And I was like, how have I never seen this amazing, perfect masterpiece? That's a movie I wish I could go back and like see it again for the first time.
I don't feel so bad now about asking the silly questions versus the serious questions of like film criticism from a unique perspective versus, well, we were kids and we wanted Kevin Costner to win because he was cute.
We did. And then, like I said, and I hadn't, because I keep in mind when that movie came out, I was in elementary school. So yeah, I wasn't seeing Goodfellas. 1994, I saw Forrest Gump several times in the theater. Hadn't seen Pulp Fiction, hadn't seen Shawshank Redemption, because Shawshank Redemption for a while in the 90s was on TNT pretty much every day. And that's really when I watched it.
Again, going to the movies and being able to see what came on TV or getting DVDs was what was kind of what influenced your cinema experience, movie experience.
Definitely. And when I was in college, really, you were still renting VHS.
Do you still have
still renting VHS? I think at this point I got rid of most of them, but there was one, and I would watch, there was an Academy Award winning section, and I watched The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, The Last Picture Show, that I remember watching the first time. That movie depressed me the first time I saw it. Great film though.
Zita, did you have another question?
Oh, yes. So getting back to the 80s movies, sorry, what were the other ones that your parents banned you from seeing?
Flashdance, Dirty Dancing, Pretty Woman, but that was early 90s, right? All of the ones that were suggestive. Yeah, not allowed to watch those. And it wasn't necessarily because of like, we weren't particularly religious or conservative. It was just, I was really innocent about a lot of things. And I remember even when I watched Pretty Woman the first time, and I don't know how to say it, Julia Roberts, the first time she's with Richard Gere, it was highly suggestive, and I didn't really understand what she was doing. That's all I'm going to say, because this is family show.
Now, okay, Flashdance, that's one that I kind of get. I think it's sort of insane that there were kids back in the day going to the movie theater to watch this movie about a stripper and her kind of coercive relationship with her boss. That movie, if you watch it today, is insane. The
And
plot
yet,
has so many different strands.
it really does, and yet she wasn't a stripper. She was a like exotic dancer, quote unquote, because she's not, because they make a point of that she's not a stripper. But I do remember, I will say this, and here's the thing that people at home really need to know. My parents are not big movie people. So I was watching all this stuff alone. My family, and I love them, and they've always supported me. They were not really the ones who got me into films. It's not because they watched all these movies all the time. So, but we had the record, the LP, the vinyl soundtrack. I would say my dad has seen more movies than my mom. My mom was really into Chariots of Fire and Out of Africa. Those are her big ones. But I remember Fatal Attraction, my mom being like, that movie is really scary. And it is. I love Fatal Attraction. Love, 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 love.
Well, that's also what I wondered. How much of film criticism now is colored by more nostalgic or your own personal film experiences, but how much also is it when you see a new film that's really progressive and just kind of blows you away?
I tend to, when I have a chance, I do love classics a lot, because I like to be able to go and read, like, what do other people have to say about it? And then I can kind of form my own opinion. For me, seeing a movie I've never seen before and then having to review it feels scary to me. And I know that sounds really silly, but it does, because I'm like, I'm going out on my own. I'm going in with nothing. And I need to be able to write intelligently about this. So it's hard. And I'm so jealous of so many of our fellow podcasters, the ones that are actually going to all of the film festivals and to all the premieres. I'm so jealous. I don't get screeners. Hello, people at home, if you want to, like, send them my way. Like, I would love this. This would be that's my fantasy. I want to go to a film festival and like cover a film festival. That would be a dream for me. Being a host on Turner Classic Movies, also a dream. Anyone at TCM, give me a call. I'm free.
You
I
would
thought
be
you were gonna say. I thought
I
you
would
were
love
gonna
that.
say you were jealous of Zita because Zita wasn't alive when all these 80s films came out. She could look at them with a fresh perspective.
Exactly. And so now I really go with, I watch it and I think, I try to watch it in a vacuum and not hear what other people say about it. And I have my opinions, and I write my review, I write my article, I give my opinions, and sometimes people agree and sometimes a wall of excrement falls on top of me. But it's mine, and I try to listen to other people's perspectives, and I try to think, but it's also hard. I feel like when you have a really extensive body of knowledge, that I do often compare movies to classic films. So when something like 1917 comes out and people are like, oh my God, it's the greatest war movie ever made. And I want to say, have you seen every war movie ever made? And I then have to go into my reservoir, I don't even know if that's the right word, of like, well, let's see. I like movies, again, about war. War is not my favorite genre, but I like movies that offer some kind of new perspective on war. The original All Quiet on the Western Front is, hey, we were disillusioned. We went in wanting to fight. We wanted to be heroes, and we were disillusioned. And war is actually terrible. Fresh perspective. Platoon has the war within the actual platoon, the people who are kind of bloodthirsty and the people who have more ideals. Again, interesting perspective. I hadn't thought about that before. Bridge on the River Kwai, losing your perspective on what the bigger picture is. Is it better to be remembered and build the bridge and show everybody how great Great Britain is, despite the fact that by doing so, you're also aiding the enemy and betraying your own people? Interesting perspective.
So
Saving Private Ryan is not one of my favorite movies. It is well made. However, the perspective of the Americans are heroes and we were awesome in World War II, to me, is not the most groundbreaking perspective. But again, well made, all of that. But that's not one of my favorite war movies. And that's another opinion that people do not like.
So streaming now, all the fancy technology, has that brought a lot more availability that you can find some of these other more obscure things that you wouldn't have been able to see?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I stream a lot of things. I've subscribed to pretty much everything.
So I was going to say, do you have a favorite platform?
I like HBO Max because they have the curated by Turner Classic Movies. Turner Classic Movies was my go-to when I was young. Turner Classic Movies, and there was a channel called Encore that isn't around anymore, but that was on. I watched a lot of movies that way. A lot of my, and when I was in high school, that's where I saw Splendor in the Grass, The French Connection, Bonnie and Clyde, just all these movies, The Collector, 1964, all of these movies were on that, The Last Picture Show. And then Turner Classic Movies, when I had DVR, I would literally go through the 30 days of Oscar and I would be like, record. And again, all of that just fed my film knowledge. And it was hard because at the time, social media did not exist. So I didn't have anyone to talk about these movies.
Hmm.
And that was awful because no one wanted to watch them with me.
Now you have Zita.
Exactly. So I would watch the Last Picture Show and I would be like, I need someone to watch this movie so I can have someone to talk about it with. Because at the time when I saw the Last Picture Show, I would have considered it one of the most depressing movies I have ever seen. It still is. But I didn't know anyone else who had seen it. And that was hard. And that's why people nowadays with film Twitter, you don't realize how lucky you are, because I felt very isolated with a love that no one really shared with me, especially at the time, females.
Something I wondered about is back in the sort of pre-internet era, and when you were first getting into cinema, did you have a sense back then of the canon? Did you have sort of a knowledge of kind of well-known films that you really felt that you wanted to watch or had to watch? Did you buy any of those classic books that people used to have in the 90s, your Hallowell's film guides and that sort of thing? Or were you someone who just sort of played it by ear and picked up films that you thought sounded interesting at the local Blockbuster?
I had a book called Famous Movie Characters and the Actors Who Played Them. That was kind of a guide of mine. And the reason I bought it is because Marlon Brando as Don Corleone was on the cover. And I'm like, ooh, I need to buy this. And some of the things that they talked about were Jack Lemmon as CC Baxter in The Apartment. And then they had pictures of other stuff that he had done. Gloria Swanson as Norma Desmond and Sunset Boulevard, things like that. And so that was sort of like, oh, that looks interesting. Maybe I'll read more about that. Then the one really was the alternate Oscars by, I think, Dan Peary. That was kind of my guide. And what he suggested are, well, here's what was nominated, here's what wasn't, and here's some other movies. And he would sort of talk about them. And I'd be like, oh, that sounds interesting. I should go rent those. And it was easier, I think, when I went to college, because when I was in high school, I didn't have a car. But I did when I was in college. In high school, I did watch Cabaret a lot. I rented that. I rented The Godfather and all that stuff. I didn't have a lot of money to buy films, but like I said, Encore was another big one. I would stumble upon movies on Encore, like The Collector. I think I watched from like the middle to the end. Splendor in the Grass, I started watching and I was like, that looks interesting. Wonder when that's going to be on again. I think Splendor in the Grass is because if you ever read the book Deanie by Junie Blume, she talks about Splendor in the Grass, but she doesn't say the title of the book because the character is named after Natalie Wood's character. But I remember her being like, Deanie, as Bud left. I said, oh, wait a minute. Isn't that the movie that they're talking about in the book Deanie? So it's just sort of all these little connections in my brain that don't make any sense to anybody but
really
me.
Fascinating. No, because it's just, you don't even realize that even we're not that far apart in ages, but just the difference of this expedited technology and distance and availability, and how much that can shape, a filmmaking experience, and having to get the books to get the literary illusions, and having to drive to go rent
it's people don't know. And like I said, it was hard because I didn't have anyone else that was watching them with me. And my family, they thought it was just kind of a hobby, like, oh, there's Amy and she's into classic movies. But it really shaped the kind of person that I am. Gone with the Wind, I did see Gone with the Wind on TV when I was young, and that definitely made an impact. But again, no one else was watching it. So it was hard. It was like this lonely little hobby that I had.
After Marlon Brando, were there other actresses or directors that came along for you? William Holden?
William Holden wasn't until I was older. I was an adult. Like literally, like when I met my former husband, we watched Stalag 17 on our first date, because that's the kind of person I am. Like I make people go on things with me. I made a date take me to see Dogville, the Lars von Trier movie. He's like, so what movie do you want to see? I'm like, I really want to see Dogville. And he's like, what is that? I'm like, never mind, you'll like it. And then he's like, what did you just make me watch? But Let me think. Other actors I really, really liked. I liked him. I liked Jimmy Stewart. I really liked Frank Capra films. I liked Billy Wilder films. William Wyler, of course. I liked the romantic things. I also liked stories with heroines that were strong and beautiful. Never really got into Casablanca. I like it. I respect it. It's not one of my favorites, but I loved Natalie Wood. I thought she was just tremendously beautiful. And then for modern things, I really liked Paul Rudd. I thought he was hot. I thought James Franco was hot, but he fell out of favor. Christian Bale, I think, is for modern. Christian Bale is probably my favorite modern actor. Just astounding. Amy Adams, Kate Winslet, got really into all her movies. Emma Thompson got really into her movies. So there are certain modern movies. The movie last year that definitely made the most lasting impact on me was The Banshees of Inisherin. So now I want to watch more Colin Farrell and Barry Keoghan. I'm really impressed with. So I'm currently obsessed with him, and I might even have to watch a Marvel movie because he's in them.
Oh gosh.
Barry, give me a call.
Okay, Amy, this is a really important question. This is going to tell the listeners a lot about your taste in cinema. Marlon Brando in the early 70s, did he regain his harshness at that point after,
No.
I would say, years of not being harsh, after being the most beautiful human being alive in the early 50s, and then somehow messing that up?
He became grotesque.
Okay.
I think that's the only word I can use to describe him. He was grotesque, and in a very similar way of what happened to Mr. Orson Welles, because if you watch Citizen Kane, you're like, wow, he's kind of a handsome, dashing man. And then seeing him in the 70s, it's a tragedy. And people dump on women all the time who age and don't necessarily look as stunningly beautiful as they age. But Marlon Brando, it's like he's unrecognizable, and it's sad.
I like how right before that, it was interesting. You were equating like great classic film influences with the really great modern actors and independent films that have touched you as on par with each other. And then you're like, but look what happens to your favorites. It's a sad,
but it happens. And I love Montgomery Clift, and I always loved Montgomery Clift and Elizabeth Taylor. And he's another one that I can just describe it. His face was broken and he never got that back. And it's a tragedy, yet his legacy, I think, lives on in the same way that James Dean does, that he died young and beautiful. And had they lived, who knows what they would have looked like. And same thing with Marilyn Monroe. Because I feel like with the way that she was going, I don't think she would have aged well. But with her passing on in the early 60s, tragic and awful. But I wouldn't have been surprised had she lived. I don't think she would have aged that well with the alcohol and the drugs. It's very sad.
Are there famous classics in old Hollywood that you have blind spots of which you're not interested or dislike?
I would say I've not seen a lot of the movies in the 30s. There are I've never seen a Carole Lombard film. Yeah, there's a lot that I haven't seen. I haven't seen Dinner at 8. I need to see some of the early stuff. Early Garbo I've seen. Silent movies I don't know a lot about. When Sight and Sound came out with their list of the 100 best movies, I feel like I've never seen a movie in my life. Looking at this list, I was like, I've never heard of most of these movies. I need to see more Kurosawa. I've seen Rashomon and I've seen Seven Samurai, but that's it. But there's so many more. I haven't seen a lot of French New Wave, except for like Umbrellas at Cherbourg. I haven't.
Zita is here.
Yeah, I haven't watched
100
But
evidence expertise.
I haven't seen Fellini's surreal films, but I've seen like La Strada. I like the Italian neorealists, but every now and then people will be like, oh my gosh, the Czechoslovakian new wave. There were so many great movies. And I'm like, I've never heard of any of these.
but
I've seen
is
several Ingmar
unmatched.
Bergman films.
You're unmatched in your old Hollywood knowledge. So compared to most cinephiles, I would say you do have this very specific area of knowledge where you can compete with anybody. You're a world beater.
Ew.
And I think for a lot of modern cinephiles, I would say a lot of them, I'm sort of, oh, I sound so judgy here, but I feel as though they haven't seen enough movies from that period. And so I'm glad that there are still people devoting their attention to that.
They're wonderful. And like I said, that's why it's hard when people who haven't seen a lot of classic films are like, oh, I went away this weekend and they showed some film group did the 50 best films of all time, and mostly it was modern. They had like Casablanca for the classic, but they'd all Paris, Texas was on there. A lot of Palme d'Or winners were on there, and I thought, I'm watching this, and on this greatest of all times, there is no David Lean, there is no Billy Wilder, or William Wyler or George Cukor, and you're like, really? Maybe, and I'm guessing it's probably because people haven't seen them.
Is that frustrating to you when you streaming, as much as it gives you access to new independent things, but when old school things or foreign things fall through the cracks?
I thought, yes, it does. It makes my blood actually boil when on the Sight and Sound list, Lawrence of Arabia wasn't on there. It's like, what? Like, have you? And it also, not just Lawrence of Arabia, but like these movies that were so influential. Like if you talk to, again, Steven Spielberg, Scorsese, Tarantino, and they talk about these classic movies, they get it. And I've watched a clip of Steven Spielberg talking about the impact that David Lean and Lawrence of Arabia had on him, and thinking, we're just going to completely not put that movie in there. And that movie that came in number one, I've tried to sit through it, and I'm like, I get it. I get that we're going through every single minutia of this woman's life over and over and over and over again for 3 hours. So that way at the end, when something goes off, it symbolizes that one small thing can like ruin your life or whatever. Like, I get that. On the other hand, it's so tedious. Why do we have to watch this?
Is that your goal in your film criticism, your reviews, and your podcasting, to shine the light on films that people have missed?
Definitely, because I feel like there's so many gems that have really affected me. I'm very evangelical when it comes to things that I really, really love. When I watch a movie, I want everybody else to watch it because I'm selfish and I want to have somebody to discuss it with. That's really what it comes down to. Is finding people. And I remember when I was in college, we talked about on our Kate Winslet episode, Heavenly Creatures, and I had to watch it for a comp lit class, but I couldn't go to the screening with everybody else, so I had to watch it in the media center at our library with like the big headphones on this little screen at like a study carrel, and it's a brutal film. And I remember looking around like does everyone know that I'm watching this bloody, violent movie? But again, I had no one to share it with. And I figure, that came out in 94, and it was nominated, I think maybe Peter Jackson was nominated, I think maybe for screenplay. But that movies like that totally get overshadowed, and I feel like more people need to see it. And so I sometimes strong arm people into watching it. I have introduced Parasite to more than one person. I've introduced Stalag 17 to more than one person. And like, I went on one date with the man like 3 years ago, and every like 6 months he'll still text me something about Goodfellas. Like, here's an interview with Martin Scorsese. Oh, here's the trailer for Killers of the Flower Moon. Not in touch with this person. I don't know what he's doing in his life. He doesn't know what I'm doing in my life, yet he remembers me from 2019 as the girl who likes Scorsese and The Sopranos.
The things we do, the more they change, the more they stay the same. The things we went through, having to listen in the library with headsets on tiny old big computer
Yes.
but to now people do the same thing with their earbuds and their iPads while watching.
Exactly. And it's normal now. And laser discs, remember those? I had to watch movies on laser discs.
Now,
And I remember watching The Searchers.
I thought my question was funny, asking about VHS, and here you all are. Well, laser discs, folks.
But VHS, totally. I still totally had VHS when I was in high school. I didn't have a DVD player till after I graduated college. God, I'm old.
Zita?
No, it's really interesting getting this insight into Amy's background as a cinephile.
My brain, I know.
Insight.
No, I do.
I didn't even have a DVD player.
No, I do really enjoy how evangelical Amy is, as she said, but she really does spread the word about these movies. And to me, that is something that I'm looking for in a critic. I do like that passion. I appreciate it when critics really love a movie in a sort of full-bodied manner. And I tend to trust those recommendations, or at least think, well, if this person feels strongly about this, I should get around to it at some point. And one of the other things that I like about Amy's criticism is that she doesn't do the Pauline Kael thing of pretending that she's above the movie. That's a very strong feature of Kael's criticism. She sort of speaks in a very supercilious tone, and I would say that Amy largely avoids that. And I think that that means that your negative reviews are really informed by a strong critical perspective and a background in researching all of these aspects of film theory, instead of just sort of rubbishing the film, acting as though it's not smart enough for you, and kind of refusing to meet it on its level.
I really do try to do that. And because I realize with literature, it's the same thing with me, that there are books that I love that I recognize are not the greatest works of art. I've read the entire Gossip Girl series. I recognize that that is not high art. Are they fun? Absolutely. Then there's the books that I love and respect, Anna Karenina,
I don't like that
John
one.
Steinbeck. But then there's books that I recognize are brilliant, yet make me want to stab somebody in the face. Like freaking Wuthering Heights. I hate that book. I realize it is well written. The writing style is great. The use of imagery. I understand all of the reasons why that book is famous. However, every single character in that book is the worst person ever. Exactly. And it makes me so angry. Ernest Hemingway. I understand why people like Ernest Hemingway. I don't.
I don't like Hemingway.
I have my reasons, but I'm not going to say, oh, it's garbage. No, it's obviously great. It's just not my thing.
But in your imagery, even as you're saying, sometimes when you read a lot of these critic reviews, when it's the cool thing to just rip into a film and constantly be sarcastic and knock it and tear at it and stab it down. And to me, when I asked you when we started, I said, it's more about the testimonial of the film. And you flat out said evangelical. Is being a cinephile a religious experience?
For me, yes. It feeds my soul, and I'm aware of how cliche that sounds, but I can't describe it any other way. Films are such a big part of who I am. And I think, and it's deeply personal, because when I was young, I look at how I felt about myself at the time and how I felt about the world around me. And I used films as an escape. And I saw characters that were the kinds of people that I want to be, these beautiful women who were smart and funny and capable and elegant, and ways that I didn't feel like I was. For most of my life, felt very ugly, very different. And I thought, I don't know, just watching women who either, or people who struggled like I was, you make those connections in movies, and then finding now as an adult other people who felt the same way. And the same thing with books and with theater. A lot of it was escape. It was how I wish life could be. And watching Natalie Wood in Splendor in the Grass and being in love, and she was so lovely. And that movie for me really captured that ache and pain of being in love. And it just in no other way. And I just thought Natalie Wood was so beautiful, and I wanted to be beautiful, and I wanted to look just like her, and have someone be so in love with me, and all of that. It's how I've learned how to define what kind of person I want to be. Sally Bowles in Cabaret, like I said, that was everything I wanted to be. I wanted to be fabulous. I wanted to be a singer. My future plans in my yearbook were to, this is deeply personal, my future plans in my senior year yearbook were to live adrift in Berlin and fall in love with a strange and extraordinary person. And that's all cabaret, baby. But and I'm a lot older now, but even now I'm like, I want to live in a boarding house and meet fascinating people and have love affairs. And to me, that was just everything I wanted to be. And my family respected all of that. And I was really, really lucky, because that's not them. They're very practical people. And so I would be like in the basement of our house watching all these movies, and they'd be like, hey, what's going on? I'd be like, shh, like, don't talk to me right now. I'm in the middle of it.
But that's interesting. You escape, not escapism. Today, it's just it can be mind-numbing popcorn, as opposed to the escape leading you to your own fascinating growths. Oh,
yes.
Zita?
Yeah, I think I had a similar relationship to movies as a young girl, and I can completely relate to the fact that, yeah, they are very aspirational, especially when you're at that age, and they really do inform sort of your goals and dreams and ambitions in life. And I think obviously you had a more sophisticated palette at that age than I did, which is good, which means that, yeah, you were off dreaming of going to Berlin back during the Weimar period. And I was fantasizing about Santa Fe and New York based on the Hollywood crap that I was watching.
But you lived so far away from New York. For me, it was literally the city. So that wasn't exotic to me.
Yes.
And one movie I will definitely say that definitely had an impact on me when I was in high school was Sense and Sensibility, which was the first Kate Winslet movie I saw. And I just remember, and maybe you remember this too, people at home, fellow podcasters, when Kate Winslet's playing the pianoforte, and Alan Rickman walks in, and he's just watching her, and he's just like so in love with her. And I just remember thinking, like, for a man to look at me that way is my dream. I want to be beautiful and have a dashing man look at me like I am just the most beautiful woman who ever lived. And I loved that movie, God. And then when she's in the rain and the guy comes and gets her on the horse, it was everything I wanted in life.
Well, I don't know. Should we put out your Twitter handle now?
Yes. A Thomasson 11. Tweet me.
And Miss Zita Short is not going to escape our critic spotlights either. This was her idea.
Gosh.
She is next.
You're really going to put my work under the microscope.
I am. I'm going to study you. I'm going to write a Wikipedia page about you. No, but I appreciate you letting me have this little trip down self-indulgent lane. But I do love this. I love you both. It means a lot to have this platform to share with everybody. And maybe someone else out there will feel a little less alone watching their classic movies.
Zita, did you have any more questions for Amy?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I think we put her through a lot today. She has had to do the majority of the chatting over the course of this podcast episode. But thank you for agreeing to do this. And it was fun to get even more info on kind of your background as a critic And I think it will really inform my consideration of your work in the future, because I do read all of your reviews. So
Thank you. I need to get back to writing. Yes, JD, I'm brainstorming.
Amy, what are you looking forward to watching next?
I am very basic this summer. I cannot wait for Oppenheimer and Barbie. And I am salivating. The one I'm really like edge of my seat is Killers of the Flower Moon, the new Scorsese film that's coming out. If anyone wants to send me a ticket to Cannes so I could see it ahead of time, I will be your best friend. I will always see Scorsese.
You want people to send you stuff. We're supposed to be talking about our own Women in Session merchandise.
Yes. Buy Women in Session merchandise. We're cool.
InSessionFilm.com is where you can read all of Amy's insightful film criticism. How were they not nominated? How was this nominated? And A Thomasson 11. Is there anywhere else that you have handles or bylines?
No, but if anyone's ever randomly curious, I think you can still get the Oscar Watch podcast. Those are still available to stream. We haven't recorded since 2018, I think, but you can get some of my older work there. And the Lion in Winter episode and the ET episode of And the Runner-Up Is. And if you're a Patreon of Kevin, you can listen to the work I do with he and Thomas O'Brien on How Did They Win?
Yes, at In Session Film is where you can follow our latest. They have some bonus Patreon content as well. And their main podcast is on YouTube, where you can see Miss Amy Thomasson talking about The Little Mermaid and arguing with JD about The Lion King.
Yes. And you can see what I look like. And you can see why I have a face for podcasting. There's a reason I don't do videos.
Nonsense.
We
should do some crazy videos for this stuff like this.
Oh, absolutely.
So Zita, you are at the 300 Passions podcast, where Amy has also done a couple episodes with you. And your main handle is Zita_short.
Yeah.
This has been really fun. This has been really crazy.
It has.
We had some tangents, some crazy girl lady things, but also some deep insights. So you can follow what we've written, and you can hear all of our past reviews at InSessionFilm.com. Ladies, this has been a lot of fun, and we get some great listeners and feedback, and we get some nice comments. It's so nice to just be able to share all of our film love with everyone. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you at the next Women in Session.
Curtain calling all unexpected seekers. The time is here for this year's Capitol Fringe Festival, an annual celebration of theater and expression taking place July 12th to the 23rd in Georgetown. Whether you feel like belly laughing at lighthearted humor, grappling with life's toughest challenges, or toe tapping to the legends of bluegrass music, there's something for every audience member at this live, uncensored event. Come laugh, cry, and make a scene with us. For more information or to book your tickets, visit georgetowndc.com/fringe today.